Welcome everybody, especially those in Architecture 140, to the first of the tutorials here that we're providing for you so you can better learn and understand the individual components of what we're asking you to do in this course and a better grasp on the softwares in order to do those. This tutorial should run no more than 30 minutes. We'll cover the basics of SketchUp here today. And again, this is for the Architecture 140 Energy and Environment class. So a sort of overview of what we'll be doing is we'll be learning the basics of SketchUp, how to alter the layout of the toolbars and utilize the tools across the toolbar itself. We'll be setting up geolocations, we'll be turning on and off shadows, and a little bit more of a few advanced features that are very pertinent to the final design project and the last homework that we still have. So we'll run through a small example of making a building or a room with fenestration, windows, and a floor and a roof, of course. And we'll show you how to manipulate those with the individual tools across the toolbar. So our learning objectives for today is to understand how to set up SketchUp, how to set up a file for SketchUp, and the basic functionality of the software itself. So you get a good grasp and a firm understanding. Obviously, to complete this tutorial on your own, you'll need a laptop that can run SketchUp. You'll need to download SketchUp Make or Pro if you've purchased it, and a mouse is preferable. Most CADing softwares require a mouse, so definitely good to have one. All right, so in the beginning, what we're going to do here is show you how to open and set up a SketchUp file. So the first thing you'll do whenever you open up SketchUp is you'll see this box here. It's going to ask you to add a license if it's a Pro version. If it's Make, it's free. There's also a trial for Pro, but eventually you'll have to purchase that. You'll find the licensing information under here. It's a non-commercial use. There's no license, so we don't have to worry. But the template here is what we're more concerned with. You can use either the simple template or the architectural design template for your project. I suggest the architectural design because it sort of changes the color scheme and adds a couple of tools to the toolbar that are really beneficial for you as you go forward. And you'll see there's some construction document and urban planning, etc. And each of these are going to give you different tool sets that are important to what you're trying to accomplish. So we're designing a building, so we'll choose the architectural design template here. We'll just highlight it and click Start using SketchUp. Now, if we go back to our slide, we see here in the number 1 bubble on the right-hand image, it's going to show us the version of SketchUp that we're running. We'll have the Preferences and Save Function panel where you see the number 2. Your toolbars will be located on number 3. Your design space is number 4. Number 5 is going to show information pertaining to the individual tool you have selected at that time. So sort of a helpful hint of what does this tool need to do in order to function. Here on the right-hand side, you'll see default trays in number 7. This is important as you select different tools because if you have the instructor tab open, it will show you what the tool's functionality is and really what it should do. And then we have number 6 down here at the bottom, which will show you the measurements. It's both showing you what you're drawing measurement-wise, and you can input numbers there as well to get more accurate measurements. And as always, if you have any trouble setting up SketchUp, we've included a helpful link down here on the bottom. All right, so the next thing that we're going to learn how to do is how to alter our workspace, how to set up the workspace so that we can comfortably navigate around and understand this is what I need to do, this is what I need to use to accomplish what I'm trying to do. So let's go back to SketchUp. So if you notice, the SketchUp pops in at a sort of 30-degree angle or the graphic view and gives you some default trays and panels here along the side. We have this entity information panel here. So when we select something, it should give us information on its layer it's on, a definition, so we can change the name, for instance, of the person. We'll have a materials panel, so we can assign materials. component panels, which we won't concern ourselves with here, but we will post a more advanced SketchUp tutorial that goes over more of that, including styles. And styles are really important for the style of the workspace that you're working in. So here we see that we have the gray color background and the sort of gray color sky. And that's what this style is saying. It's the architectural design style, which you can set up your own. And then we have the shadows panel here. We're going to go ahead and close all of those for now and take a look at this default tray up at the top. So in the next section, we'll go over what each individual one of these components do and how we can manipulate the workspace with each component. But for now, we have the simple file, edit, and view. We can turn on our individual things, so we can turn off section cuts. And that just means as we're cutting through things, it's going to show you a cut line. We can turn off the axes if we'd like to. I think it's beneficial to keep the axes on. And then you can turn on and off guides and etc., shadow and fog, which we're going to go over shadows in a bit. We can set different camera views. You can look at standard views, so sort of orthographic, a top view. Our person is just a thin piece of paper, which is why you see him as a line here. And then we have our toolbars. So here we have all the different tools. These are the name of the tools here that are on the toolbar. But we also have the window that we can set up different trays and toolbars with. So for instance, here on the default tray on the right-hand side, this is the tray. On the default tray, it gives us materials, components, styles, shadows, and instructor. So we can reorganize these if you'd like to by dragging them. So there's the instructor from the previous. You can also decide to take those out if they're too intrusive. You can just turn them off and you'll see it'll go away from the default tray. If you close one out by accident by hitting this X on the side, you can always come back to window and turn on a tray. Or you can turn on whatever tray you want. You can create your own trays and change those out. And then of course we have extensions, which you should all know about right now. Sapphira, it should be the one that you have installed. And there are plenty of other extensions you can plug into SketchUp, although we don't advise it for right now. So these trays, you can see, you can drag. If you were to click anywhere that they have that little dash line. So let's put that back where it goes. This little dotted line here on the right-hand side, left-hand side, if you grab that, you can drag your tray across the screen, or you can pull it out so it can be free floating. If you grab the blue bar at the top, you can push it against the side. You can push it against the top. You can go against this side, the bottom. There are just tons of different opportunities for you to just alter the workspace with however you feel most comfortable. And we can always right-click and you can turn on different things. So we can right-click on here and we can turn on drawing. And so now we have the drawing tools, advanced drawing tools popped out instead of having to go to the draw. You can turn on the layers tool so you can select different layers easily, and you can manipulate these however you see fit. So however this makes you most comfortable. And if you right-click and just turn off, we can turn off styles, we can turn off layers, and we can just leave the get started, because that's mostly what we're going to be needing for right now. Great. Now we have our workspace here, this giant area in the middle. To easily move around, we have a couple of different commands that we can use. You can use the middle mouse button, which is going to activate this orbit command here that you see. Again, that's the middle mouse button, and you can rotate all around. If you hold Shift and middle mouse button, you can drag the screen side to side, up and down, but it's going to stay on one individual plane. You can zoom in and out with the middle mouse button. And those are your three basic functionalities for moving around the screen. So again, it's middle mouse button for orbit, middle mouse button and Shift for panning, and just middle mouse button for zooming. So if we see here, we have an entity. So before we start drawing anything, let's talk a little bit about this. If you see we go from left to right, the selection box is solid on all around. That means that everything that will be selected must be completely in this box. So if you notice here, we're not selecting the gentleman, which I believe his name is Chris. But if we go from right to left, it's a dash line. That means anything touching the selection box will be selected. So there are two different types of selections. You have left to right, which means it must be all encompassed, and right to left, which means it just must be touching. So let's go ahead and get rid of him here. All right, so I'm going to pull ourselves over into the workspace now that we know how to move around and set up our workspace and get us a nice, comfortable working environment. Now we're going to go over the final portion, which is how to use the basic tools. This is kind of the bread and butter of the software itself and what we're really trying to show you. This SketchUp model here could be made in under an hour. It looks daunting, but these are all very basic things that after you create a couple of items, you can copy and paste, manipulate, rotate, stretch, and pull. All right, so the first thing we're going to show you is the selection tool. Of course, right now we have nothing to select, but you can still see that if you click on the left mouse button and go from left to right, you get the solid, and from right to left, you get the dashed. We have an eraser tool for erasing components. We have a pencil tool for drawing, which is just you click with the left mouse button, no need to hold down, and you can draw a line. If you see the line turn red, that means it's going to be on the x-axis. Green means on the y-axis, and blue means on the z-axis. If you click on the arrow, that shows you some other tools that you have. So we have the freehand sketch tool, which we can just draw any random shape with, and it becomes an object. We can use our eraser tool to erase that object. We have this arc tool. If you were to select one point, an end point, and then the arc itself. And again, you can do that along the y-axis or the z-axis. Under the arc tool, you have a 1-point arc, 2 and 3-point arc, and also a pi arc, which is inputting numbers. You won't really be using this tool all that much. Next, we have the geometric tool, so we can make rectangles and circles and polygons. We can also rotate the rectangle. So for the rectangle tool, which is the default, you select 1 point, and then you drag the rectangle out. It will always default into this XY axis. And if you get it very carefully on the blue axis, you can see where it will say on blue axis, but it won't actually draw anything. It's always going to be 2D as long as you're facing down on the file. When you see this dashed line pop up, that means it's a perfect square. So we can click again and it creates a square with 4 lines and a plane in the middle. So these are actually 5 different components. If we were to erase one of the lines, it becomes just a 3-line because it removes that line and the plane in the middle. Alternatively, if we right click on it and click erase, then it becomes 4 lines without the plane. And you can do the same thing with 2 lines or 1 line and all of the lines. Same thing works for the circle. So we can draw our circle. And you have just 1 line around and the plane in the middle. The next is the push-pull tool, which I think is a really awesome tool. So we can draw this box here, and let's just say we want to quickly make a mass, a building per se. If we click on the push and pull tool, it's going to highlight whenever we go over a surface, whether that's the above or under of a surface. We can grab it and we can drag it. So again, you must click and pull. You can go up or down. Now, if you notice, there are some faces here and they're all white. If we were to remove one of these faces, you see the inside faces are gray. So in SketchUp, it sets interior and exterior faces. Interior faces are gray, exterior faces are white. If, for instance, you draw a model and this face is gray and the rest are white, not that this will actually mess up much, but certain softwares or plugins will require you to have all the exterior faces one way. You can always select the one face that's wrong or the faces that are wrong and click reverse faces right there in the menu. If you delete a face and you'd like a face back, you can use the drawing tool or the rectangle tool, the shape tool. And you just have to draw any amount of line on it, and it will fill in the rest of that void. So now we have our solid object back. Well, perceived as solid. We have an offset tool here. So we can grab any surface, for instance, let's just say one of these lines, and we can offset that line to create an even further surface. So now we have a surface with intersecting planes, although you see that here we have this black line and then there's no line here, and that's because there is no division. There's a division happening here, which is the edge of the base box, base cube, and then here there's nothing. So these two act as independent components. You can't trim this with this or anything. It would have to match up all the way to the edge right here. The next tool that we have is this move tool. So if we wanted to move the entire box, we'd have to select the whole box, and we can use the move tool, and we can move that on any of the axes. So whether that be X, Y, or Z. Alternatively, if you select just one face and move it, you can see that it will shift that one face and stretch the rest of the faces. The next tool that we have is this rotate tool. Same thing, if you only select one face, it will rotate the one face itself, and you can keep doing that to twist and deform an object. Or if this were an entire building unit, you can grab it and you can rotate the entire building. We have our scale component, one that you probably won't be using much of, but you can scale based on any of these points here. So for instance, if I'm grabbing the edge here, I can scale based on this one surface or this one edge. I can scale based off of one axis here or one corner. That will cause the entire thing to scale uniformly. If you hold down Shift while doing scale, it'll break the uniform and let you scale at any given ratio you'd like. So those are our basic drawing tools, and you can see how you can draw other components on the faces of objects or in different areas of objects, and you can push and pull them and make really interesting building forms very quickly, creating all kinds of randomness. And that was done incredibly fast. Of course, you can always do voids on the inside of a building. So here you see we did a void on the inside, and that's just with the push or pull tool. And we just push it into the building. Now that we have a grasp on the basic functionality of the SketchUp, I'm going to show you how to make things based off of proportions. So let's say we wanted to make a 6-foot by 4-foot by 10-foot box. So the first thing we can do is we can use the measurement tool, which is the tape measure here, and we can click in space, and we can type in 6 feet. Now, if you notice, whenever I typed in 6 feet, it shows up down here. This is good because you can see visually what you're typing up. Now, in order to actually have the measurement tool work, it needs to work off of another object. You can't just measure in space off of nothing. So we'll draw our first line, which is the 4 foot, and we'll have it snapped green to the y-axis. So we'll type in 4 feet. And so now we have a 4-foot line. You can draw a 6-foot line if you want to off of the x-axis, and then use the rectangle tool from point to point to create a perfect 4 by 6 foot box. Alternatively, you can draw a 4-foot line, use the measurement tool, 6 feet over, and then use the endpoints. We drew this box a little to the right, which is why it doesn't match up perfectly. So those are two different ways that you can draw a perfectly proportioned box. Then we said we wanted the box to be 10 feet, so we'll grab the surface and we'll type in 10 feet. And now we have a 4 by 6 by 10 foot box. On the surface of this box, if we wanted to put a window inset 1 foot on either side, we can use the tape measure tool, come in 1 foot here, 1 feet here, same on all sides. And we can then draw a rectangle for our window on the surface. Let's say we wanted the window to be inset 0.6 inches. Sorry, 0.5 feet, so 6 inches. So we'll grab the surface, push it in, and type in 6 inches, and that pushed the window in 6 inches. And we wanted a 3-foot tall overhang, perfectly sized to the window, sticking out 3 feet. We can grab that measurement tool again, come up 3 inches, draw our overhang, and pull the overhang out by 3 feet. And so now we're left with a perfectly proportioned building, exactly what we want. And we can begin to manipulate this a little bit more with materiality as we go forward. If you would like to annotate as you're moving forward in SketchUp, you can always use this annotation tool here. And you can click on certain components. You can say this is the overhang here. So this is overhang A. Oops. And so now you'll always have that annotation on there so you can remember what things were done. So you can leave yourself notes. And you can always double click to re-edit that. But let's say we wanted to make this look a little bit more like a building. So we have the tool here for Paint Bucket. As soon as we click it, you'll see the materials tray pop up here on the right-hand side. In the middle of the tray, there's a long list, drop-down menu of many different materials and colors and other things that we can use. I prefer to tend to stick to colors, but you can use patterns and metals, woods, water, lots of different materials here. So let's say we went with this wood pattern. We can begin to paint and color our building. And I wanted the overhang to be this metal pattern here. And maybe the top of the building as well. And the window I want to actually look like a window. So there is a window somewhere in here, glass and mirrors. And we can choose between a mirrored surface or any of these that have a line through them show as a see-through material. So we have green, blue, black, cyan, and a sort of watery color. And so with these basic tools, we now have our proportioned little building and some materiality on it. And this thing is ready to analyze if we'd like to. Of course, the materiality isn't needed for analyzation, but we can also grab an entire section of a building, such as this one. And if we paint it, it will paint all the components that are selected. Just want to throw that in there. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to show is how to set a geolocation and then use the sun path. So to set a geolocation for this little tiny building hut, we will go to File, Geolocation, and Add a Location. I'm going to leave this up for a second. That's File, Geolocation, Add a Location. It'll pop up with this Add a Location box, and so we can search for any place. Mount Angel, Oregon is half of the class's project assigned place. So we'll stick with Mount Angel, Oregon for this, and If you notice, we're zoomed out here, and so we don't actually see anything. There's no white box like we saw before, and that's what's important for us. So if we go back in, Mount Angel, Oregon should be somewhere around here. You'll see a white box pop up, and that's a geolocation box. That's what we need in order to pull into SketchUp. So you'll have to keep zooming in until you see one. We'll select the region, make sure the region is selected, and we'll import that region. So now we have Mount Angel, Oregon, and we have our building here. Very small, but we still have it. And it's placed on Mount Angel map. Now, we think our building should be a little tilted because we're looking at the road system here on the ground. We can draw a line to help orient us if we'd like to. And then we can rotate our building roughly in line with the line, and then we can move the building out. All right, so now we have our tiny little building that's oriented to a road in Mount Angel, Oregon, and we want to see the daylight shadows. So what we're going to do next is grab the window itself. If you right click, you can align view to the window. So we're looking straight at the window. And then for those PC users, we can go to the shadows here. For Mac users, you'll have to go to View and Shadows. And we'll turn those on with this little button here. And so immediately you'll see the overhang is working because we have the profile of it happening on the window itself. But because the window is a transparent material, it's going through the window and then it's splashing on that wall in the background. So we can actually go back to the Materials tab, grab a color that's similar to that of a window, and we can paint the window surface itself. So we get a more accurate representation of how the shadow is resting on the window surface. We can then change the time of day here and see how does that change throughout the day. And we can set different time periods of the year and see how that sun is changing. And of course, you can turn back off shadows, and you can always get rid of geolocation if you'd like to by just deleting. And that's a sort of quick intro to SketchUp, looking at some of the tools, looking at shadows and materiality and basic tool sets of how to draw and manipulate. Of course, there are a lot of little features that we sort of went over and that we didn't go over. So looking back at the PowerPoint, there's a Getting Started with SketchUp link here on the bottom, and this will bring us to a website that will show us everything we need to know beyond setting up the file and using the basic tool sets. And so you can learn more about the individual tools, the advanced tools, and what are the other things that we can do. So you'll notice there's a non-pro and a pro version of the tool sets, and it also shows you how to quickly manipulate and create a mass, add materiality, draw, export, and open up new files. Well, I hope that you all found this beneficial. Again, I will timestamp this presentation so that you can go to individual pieces if you'd like to. And I hope that the next tutorials that we post you'll find equally as beneficial.